Well, good morning to everybody. Thank you for following the rule that was up there on the projector earlier. Do not sit in front of the podium. I didn't create that rule. I feel a little uncomfortable myself, trying to wiggle myself backwards a little bit. But I guess that's appropriate for our series here. Someone wanted everybody this side of the podium and didn't want the podium past about halfway down the aisle, so you were. I could tell Kelvin was looking at these pews down here. It means you're going to have to get up and move later, right? I hope you Texas Tech fans aren't too uncomfortable this morning. I didn't have to. I just felt like I needed to, I guess. Yeah, poke the bear a little bit. TCU too, yeah. Paulus has mentioned TCU and Baylor. We can throw Baylor in there. We just make everybody feels pretty uncomfortable. Good to see everybody here this morning. We're starting week number 2 of this series we started last week called Uncomfortable. And we'll kind of review a few things from last week where we are. Can you hear me there? Is everything good? We still good? All right. Just taking some time to look at think about our purpose as Christians and trying to walk step in step with our Creator, and how rarely does He take a heavy interest in us being real comfortable, you know. These are some of the things that we talked about last week. And we're going to touch on, believe me, we'll talk about how there's really nothing wrong with being comfortable, and some of the things in this world that make us comfortable that we enjoy, and those are things that God created as well. So really do not mean for this to be a series that is brings us down, you know, too much, but we realize, we understand that as I look around this room, every single one of us, and it's probably different for everybody, but every single one of us are dealing with things daily, weekly, that are very uncomfortable, that are tough, that are challenging, that are stressful, that are difficult and hard, right? Okay, I see a few heads moving. I can remember, Carrie probably can't even remember this. I can remember going to church out where her family grew up, going to church out at Highway 36 just outside of Abilene, probably 10, 15 miles outside of Abilene. If you've ever gone to Abilene, down Highway 36 from Cross Plains, you eventually kind of make that curve, and there's, they just call that the Highway 36 Church of Christ out there. And all right, we've got a story. There's Carrie Beth Church, yeah. That's where Carrie grew up. Her dad was an elder there for many years and led singing most every Sunday morning. Why did I start this story? What was I talking about? I remember why. I remember going out there one Sunday morning, night, I can't remember what. We were either engaged or already early married, and Carl Burkeen was out there doing like a study, and he talked a little bit about, you know, if you have not faced challenges, tests, trials, major things that have gone on in your life, which again, I look around this room and I go, I know we all have. But the way he put it, he said, just wait a little while longer, because you will. It's coming your way. And I remember being a young man at that time going, oh man, what does that mean for me? Because I wasn't too old at that point in time. I understand a little bit better now, okay? And so as we talk about just uncomfortable things that come our way, I think it's important for us not to just all act like life is totally hunky-dory and great and perfect and beautiful and wonderful, and because it's really not, and we don't need to pretend like that it is. I'll remind you, last week we looked at what are the things that we think about, dream about, look forward to. You know, the human mind, everybody has their idea of just beautiful comfort, you know, and we threw a few ideas out. You know, you'll remember we looked at this is some people's idea of just great comfort. You can't wait to get back to the beach in Mexico or wherever you're going next, you know, and if you could just spend 6 months here before ever coming back, you'd do it. That's your idea of comfort. That's my idea. You get homesick, I hear you. Hey, and we put that up there last week as well, if you'll remember, just someone sitting on the couch with a blanket and a little, you know, latte in their lap. You know, that's some people's idea of comfort. This is if you went, all right, Kurt Jones, what's your idea? Put me here at Pebble Beach for a week or two and just let me enjoy some beautiful comfort, relaxation, golf, you know, all that kind of stuff. Still more of you might be, it's probably more of the crowd that's upstairs over here right now that doesn't mind staying in bed a few extra hours and sleeping in is just kind of the dream of comfort. All of these things, and we're just, you know, barely touching the tip of the iceberg of what we find ourselves really being pulled towards just as human beings. You know, it's just human nature, right? Okay? To be pulled in this direction of wanting that serotonin, that drug in the brain, that just kind of happiness, feeling good, everything's fine, everything's perfect. This is what we find ourselves striving for. And sometimes for our family, it's just, you know, we had Maddie that came through and was involved in tons of stuff, and Grant still, you know, he's a senior this year, involved in tons of stuff. For us, sometimes it's just moments of nothingness. We just want nothing to be going on. You know, we look at our calendar for this coming week and we go, oh man, we've got something this night, 2 things this night, and you know, and we just want nothing to be happening. That's comfort, you know. I think everyone can relate to that as well. But we find ourselves thinking about these things and striving for these things and pursuing these things so much, sometimes from week to week, that really when some of these uncomfortable moments come about, it really shakes us. It really puts us in a different frame of mind. We talked about this last week. This was just kind of a statement that was made. Today, more and more people believe that if something makes you physically or emotionally uncomfortable, then you shouldn't have to do it. Okay? I don't know anybody. You don't know anybody like that? Are you being for real?
Yeah, I'm being for real.
Okay.
I mean,
all right.
it wasn't an option in my family, and not doing something wasn't an option in my family. And then
The key words there might be within your family. Because I know your family. I'm not going to say your family was this, but I also work with hundreds and hundreds of high school kiddos every year. And I've seen it for years and years and years. And, you know, when I think about cancel culture and I think about the lack of workforce in some of these places that used to be jobs that you guys think about back when you were a teenager, and some of the most simple jobs that were out there to go work that teenagers were so anxious to go, I'll go do that. I'll go work hard and get paid for that. Okay? These are some of the things that I see today out of teenagers and the direction that it feels like each generation is moving towards, and I'm not speaking to any one particular family, But in general, when you look at the whole, that's more and more of the attitude today, I feel like. I don't feel like we're moving the other direction. I don't feel like we're getting tougher, if you want to say it that way. I would say I feel like we're getting softer. And some of that's just natural with new technology, with new inventions. We talked last week about just some of the things that we have today. I can get up here this morning and I don't have to have any paper notes or anything. I can just work off of my phone. Just makes it... Air conditioning. Air conditioning, for instance, sitting on padded pews in the air conditioning this morning. Let's rewind 140 years ago. Let's go back to some Church of Christ back in Kentucky in the 1880s. Their speaker didn't have a microphone on so everybody could hear. There wasn't air conditioning blowing. There wasn't padded pews. Okay, these are just things. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. But we are constantly moving in this direction of comfort. I mentioned last week, my wife loves our heated seats in our car, you know. Anytime we're coming back from like Austin late night, she falls asleep because she's sitting in a heated seat, you know. Elbow her a little bit. Wake up, talk to me. These are just natural, comfortable things that just lead the next generation down this path of seeking more and more and more comfort. Boy, we're not moving very fast. I'm gonna end up. This is gonna be a 10-week series instead of a 6-week series. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
I will tell you that when I was growing up in Lake Victor, Texas.
Lake Victor, Texas, where there was a lake or where there was no lake? I can't ever remember that. Never saw a lake, she said. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Back when you were talking about, there was no air conditioning in this room. The way you got a breeze was open the windows.
Open the windows. Yeah.
About way back yonder. Yeah. I don't think I'm that old.
Not that way back yonder far, huh? Just a little bit of way back yonder.
I finished high school in 1956, and we came into town for special events here at the church building.
Mm-hmm.
Many years before that, and there were no air conditioning in this room. It was not quite this large, and the lights come from one long wire down closer to the people for lighting.
Mm-hmm.
No fancy skinny thing.
So it wasn't just that terribly long ago that we're talking. When you look around and you go, okay, what kind of changes have been made, and where are we going to be? Where are we going to be in another 60, 70 years? You know, that brings a great question. So you remember last week we asked this question as well. Why does God pull us out of our comfort zones? And maybe there's a question before that one, maybe, of does he? I think it's clear. I think we spoke on some things last week that it's clear that he does. I think he's almost always tugging us out of our comfort zones, okay? And we talked about a handful of reasons last week. You remember we talked about growth and conditioning, getting us prepared maybe for something he wants to use us for. But growth, preparation, and we also talked about in this room, all right? I'm 51, be 52 here in a few months. To some of you guys, I'm a young man, okay? But we talked a little bit about how really doesn't matter what age we're at. Some of you might have those thoughts of, well, I'm a little too old for growth. I've reached the pinnacle of growth, and that's it for me. And I'd love to visit with you after church about that. We could talk. I don't think God ever quits trying to grow you and pull you in a position where he can use you as We talked last week, why does he pull us out of those to be an example to others? Okay? You at whatever age can be an example to younger generations. Seemed like there was one other thing we talked about. I guess really the preparation part and just using us kind of went hand in hand. And so we began to talk a little bit about people God used to make most of his biggest impacts. I nearly put the word in there, all of his biggest impacts. I think we probably could have, okay? We're all, well, there you go, I used the word all eventually. We're all pulled out of their comfort zones. Really can't think of anyone that God has used for significant impact in his kingdom, his eternal kingdom. I'll challenge you to think about that. That he ever just kind of went, all right, I'm setting you over here on this cruise ship, on this beach in Mexico. You just enjoy the luxuries of life. Everything's beautiful and easy and fine and beautiful and no stress, no challenges, no, you name it. I can't think of anybody. Doesn't happen. Okay, again, those things aren't awful. They're not terrible. There's nothing wrong with being totally comfortable and enjoying life at the highest level, but I can't think of anyone that God used to make huge impact, big impact, maybe little impact, medium impact, that he just pulled out of just total comfort, excellent situation. We put a few of these up here. This is kind of where we ended last Sunday. These were some of the first people that I wanted us to think about. Starting in the upper left-hand corner there, that's Joseph. And we went to Genesis chapter 39 if you want to go there. I think everyone is familiar with the story of Joseph and his biography. I think his is the second longest biography that we can look at in the Old Testament, right in behind Moses. We know a whole lot about Joseph and his life. And at this point in time, he's already been sold by his brothers into captivity. That had to have been pretty uncomfortable, okay? That had to have been a traumatic experience. I don't think any of us can come even close to imagining that. But where we are right here in Genesis chapter 39, we touched on this last week. This is when he is in Potiphar's house, and he has Potiphar's wife has put him in a real difficult and uncomfortable situation, right? What verses do I have up there? Starting at verse 20. Genesis 39, verse 20. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison. Remember, this is because it looked like he took advantage of Potiphar's wife's advances at him. Everybody remembers that, right? And so, in verse 20, Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness, granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. And as we look at Joseph's story, this is kind of a common theme. But the Lord was with him and took care of him. I said last week of a lot of these people that I've studied, and these are just 4 of them up here on the screen right now. We'll probably talk about some others as we go through this study in the coming weeks. Man, I've always been so impressed with Joseph. And one of the reasons why is because, as I've looked at it and read, maybe you can correct me, never does God just directly communicate with him through an angel or through God just talking to him, as we'll see some of these other people that we're talking about. Joseph just kind of had to have faith and trust, right? And that's probably most closely connected to the way we have to interact with uncomfortable moments, tough situations this year in our lives, okay? God hadn't sent an angel to talk to any of us when we face some really tough circumstances. He's not speaking to us through a burning bush like we'll talk about with Moses here in just a minute. And Joseph just had to trust, had to have faith, but you have to know these positions, these situations that he was put in were very, very tough situations, uncomfortable situations. But what did God have planned for him? His purpose was very specific. It was to take care of his family and his brothers later, years down the road, when they were going to show up looking for food because of a famine. And he took care of them. And he preserved the Israelite nation, right? Moses, Exodus chapter 4, if you want to turn over there. I think everyone knows the story of Moses, and at this point in time that we're talking about, where God has come and spoken to Moses about a mission. You want to talk about preparation. You want to talk about getting someone ready for a mission that God has ahead of you, okay? And Moses isn't a young man right now, okay? Maybe this is kind of his middle age of his life, I might say. I've read before, I've seen the saying before that Moses spent 40 years of his life, is that right, thinking he was somebody. He spent the next 40 realizing he was a nobody. And then he spent the last 40 of his life understanding what God can do with a nobody. Okay? So even in his old age is really where God uses him the most. And this is where he has left Egypt. I think he's out working his father-in-law's land when God speaks to him through this burning bush. But in Exodus chapter 4, verse 11, it says here, the Lord said to him, well, let's back up. I'm going to back up to verse 10. I'm going to back up to verse 10. Moses said to the Lord, "Pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and slow of tongue." Remember, God is telling him right now, he's already challenged him with, here's your task that I have in front of you. You're going to go get in front of the most powerful rulers of the world at that point in time in Egypt. Okay? Pharaoh in Egypt. Very, very few times in history, world history, can we study that kind of thing going on. I'll tell you what it reminds me of here in a little bit, but go ahead, Kelvin. Kelvin, speaking about how old Moses was when he killed the Egyptian in Egypt. Right, yeah. He wasn't like 20 years old or 18, 19, 20. He was somewhere around 40 when he killed the Egyptian there. Mm-hmm. I often read these verses that I just read, and I think of Moses being around my age, 50, early 50s maybe. I don't know. I might be a little bit off. But again, this is just beginning to challenge him with, all right, here's what I've got in store for you in the latter parts of your life maybe. Where Moses was probably thinking, man, I'm on my father-in-law's land. My father-in-law's got a nice big ranch out here, several hundred acres. I'm just chilling every day, working a little bit of land, working at my own pace. Married, dream of my, just, man, he's got it on cruise control. It's easy street. He's coasting, okay? And what does God do? And does Moses walk away going, oh, good heavens, this wasn't the way I had it drawn up. This wasn't the way I had it planned out. that's kind of what I think about when I see this, when I read about this. God is pulling Moses out of his comfort zone for a bigger mission, one of the biggest missions that we can look backwards and think about. And Moses has no idea at this point in time. He thinks, okay, maybe this is a simple little 2-week deal. I'll be done and that's it. No, sir. He's got a lot of work ahead of him. Bottom left, it's Mary, the mother of Christ. Let's look over at Luke in the New Testament. We've looked at a couple of patriarchs. Now let's go over to the New Testament. Luke chapter 1. Luke chapter 1, I think I changed these verses here and went all the way back to verse 28, where Mary, the mother of Jesus, is going to be approached by an angel. If I'm thinking right, this is Gabriel, right? Gabriel, the angel Gabriel. It doesn't say it here in Luke, but I think it does other places where we can read, which is